for me, it's just, continue to reach out to as many people as possible, have really genuine conversations, understand what their challenges are, either, as a customer for hiring, and their situation, and then really offer how I can help them better their situation.
Welcome to Sales Pipe Pros Podcast. Here's your host, Mike Petrosyan.
All right, everyone, welcome to Sales Pipe Pros. Today, I have a very special guest. She is a rock star turned entrepreneur, started in sales recruiting, and now has her own business with 5 locations across U.S., managing over 100 employees. And I'm super excited to have her. Carolyn Betts Fleming, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Absolutely. So excited to have you. How are you? I know we're in the COVID crisis right now. How are you, first of all, coping with all of that?
Hanging in there, moved my Peloton into my dining room by the window. And it's not too bad. We have a good amount of space for the city, but 2 weeks into working from home, I'm definitely ready to be back in our office with all of our teams. So
absolutely,
hoping that happens, sooner rather than later, but prepared to be on lockdown for a while.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally hear you. We have to protect ourselves, but at the same time, especially for us salespeople, we like to be out there networking, shaking hands and whatnot. So clearly none of that happened.
Yeah.
But prior to COVID, prior to you starting the business, let's just start it off from your background. How did you get started in sales? Tell us a little bit about how it all started for Carolyn.
Yeah, well, to start, I always loved sales. As a kid, I was, would win all the contests with campfire candy and magazines and all that. And so I went to UNC, Chapel Hill, graduated, moved back to the Bay Area. I'm a Bay Area native, and my first job was actually selling ads in the Yellow Pages, and that was back when they had the actual book. And so door to door, which obviously people aren't doing that right now with COVID, and so I did that for a year, and cut my teeth in B2B sales, small business, obviously, and when I knew I wanted to move on from that, I basically fell into recruiting. I saw an ad on Craigslist. I mailed my resume in, and they called me and brought me in, and they were looking at me as a candidate, and I was confused, and I was like, well, what about me working here? It seemed like a cool, small boutique company, and everyone seemed like they were having a lot of fun. And so I worked there for 4 years. And then I left and I did advertising sales or media SaaS at careerbuilder.com. And I did enterprise sales. So Fortune 500 companies, some of my clients were McAfee, Symantec, Netflix,
Wow.
Levi's. And then, that was where the idea of Betts Recruiting was born. And actually, when I worked at Andiamo Group, which was the boutique, I'd always thought about the potential of starting my own company and my own agency specifically. But I wasn't quite ready when I was leaving there. And so at Career Builder, I absolutely loved selling technology into large companies. However, I felt that a lot of the service side was missing. And so I took the plunge and started with just me about 10 years ago in my 1-bedroom apartment in the marina. And here we are, 10 years later, over 100 people, and with not only the services business, but a technology platform as well. That's Connect.
Yeah. I remember you folks started off as just doing sales, or do I have that wrong? And then you guys transitioned into technology, operations, leadership, et cetera, correct?
Yeah, so it was, sales, so all types of sales, SDR, AE, enterprise, etc. And then we also evolved into doing marketing, sales leadership, CSM, sales engineering, but no technical stuff. And then we do some people operations, recruiters, etc., but no accounting, finance, just really, we call it go-to-market. So anyone on the go-to-market team that's going to go and take your product to market.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your sales style. You mentioned you did enterprise sales. Did you have a specific methodology that you follow, like a Sandler, Medic, anything along those lines that attributed to your success of starting a business?
Not really. And I've read a lot of these books and the Challenger Sale, et cetera. And for me, it really comes down to relationships and building relationships with people in general. And so I think that was why I've flocked to recruiting in general. And it's really interesting that over the years, and also just execution, right? And I
Right.
think that for me, it's, the relationship, and it's just making it happen, right? Every day, wake up, and I never was a big fan of counting phone calls or any of that stuff. And we obviously have, metrics within Betts and,
Sure.
and a process. However, for me, it's just, continue to reach out to as many people as possible, have really genuine conversations, understand what their challenges are, either, as a customer for hiring, and their situation, and then really offer how I can help them better their situation. So,
Yeah.
no real methodology there.
Well, I like the way you mentioned the relationship aspect. So I read Challenger Sale, and apparently I found out that I was the relationship guy. And in the Challenger Sale, it said that that is the worst. That's the worst portion to have in order to be in sale. You have to be a challenger. And relationships, they don't sell as much, but I've done quite well for myself. Looks like you've done quite well for yourself as relationship builders. And I feel like that's the way to go, is really making those bonds, not selling people, but just starting conversations. And eventually, whether it's next week, next month, next year, we'll eventually come to terms on something. So I totally agree with you there.
Well, I also think that once the relationship is there, then you can have conversations about,
Right.
trust, how they're running their interview process, what they're doing, how they're currently hiring. And, so there is an aspect of consulting and advising.
Right.
However, I think that it starts with the relationship and trust, and then you can challenge from there.
Absolutely. So outside of being a salesperson, you also started bringing on your own reps, not just actually recruiting people, but actually managing it. How did that transition go from you being in your 1-bedroom apartment in the marina to now managing over 100 reps? But let's start off with, like, how was it the first few that you had to actually start managing? What was that process like?
Well, I was completely overwhelmed. I had, over a dozen clients, and anyone who's been in the recruiting business understands that, yeah, bringing on clients is great, but then you have to execute. And if you don't
Right.
follow through, if you're not sending great talent, they're not moving through the process, you're going to be out of business because nobody is going to want to use you anymore. And so there was a fellow alum from UNC who had reached out to me. She had moved to San Francisco, and I had helped her land a job. And she she took me out to have a glass of wine to say thank you. And I had asked, what she was doing when she moved to San Francisco. And the job was kind of a temporary situation
Right.
that she had taken. And anyway, she was joining all these networking groups, and it's a long list of all the things that I recommend that our team do to then meet people and build these relationships. And I was like, wow, have you ever thought about recruiting? I am completely underwater, and I've been thinking about hiring somebody. And what do you think about joining me? It's kind of weird, right, to hire somebody when you
Right.
so I had to bring on an HR consultant and get an offer letter ready, and get it to her. And so then I got our first office on Market Street in the Phelan building. And that was back when it was a lot of jewelry and small things before they kind of wiped that all out and put in some larger tech companies.
Right.
So that was the first person. And then it kind of built from there. And over the first few years, every few months we were moving to larger offices and, hiring more people just to keep up with the demand of all these companies that were scaling their sales team.
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about that. Once you started hiring people, obviously you started opening offices as well. What was your second office opening like, and how did you manage the employees and all the managers between both offices? Because you clearly can't be in two places at the same time, but I'm sure you wanted to be involved in the business. So how does that process work?
Yeah, I mean, without getting into all the details of it, so New York was the second office, and it
Nice.
was really customer based. So a lot of our clients were, can you help us in New York? Can you help us in New York? And once we heard that enough times, we're like, we should do this. And we tried to do it from San Francisco, and we realized, and because of the value that we have of really building relationships, we realized we had to be there in order to be successful. So I ended up moving out there temporarily. I got an apartment in the West Village, which was amazing.
Nice.
It was, and
Good
it didn't
place to be.
last that long. I kind of wish I would have stayed longer now in hindsight, because New York is just so fabulous.
New
And
York is New York.
exactly. But so we relocated a couple people out there from our San Francisco team that wanted to move to New York. And then we hired a few people from New York. And then ultimately somebody who was a leader who I'd worked with the Andiamo group, Amber Banks, she's still a dear close friend of mine. She moved to take over that office. She had gone in the interim to work with some of the team members. And so she moved out there. We were in the same office at the same time. And anyone who knows Amber just knows that she's a complete firecracker, force to be reckoned with. And so both of us in the same office with a very small team, it was a lot of, for lack of a better term, HBIC kind of energy. And I realized for her to take it over, I had to get out and go back to San Francisco and give her the reins. And so she ran with it and just did a phenomenal job building a great team out there. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And you've done that 4 more times, sounds like, because you have 5 offices across the U.S. right now in Austin, L.A. I think I'm missing one, New York, Austin, L.A. Chicago. You have the best cities over there. I love all the.
If I don't want to travel there, we're not going to open an office. I'll tell you that.
Absolutely. So now you're managing over 100 employees, sales managers, directors, etc. What is that like now, going from, once again, starting off with just building your own brand, building your own company, managing clients yourself? Now you've kind of it sounds like you've stepped away from the sales side completely, and now you're managing the directors and really much larger positions. How are you in 5 places at the same time?
We've been really fortunate to build an awesome culture and train a lot of people from the ground up. So currently, every single one of my managing directors, there's Leslie in Austin. She was one of the top people in San Francisco. And so she moved out there to take over that team at one point when we had a leadership. It was funny. I asked her if she could go interim and fill in because we had lost a leader out there. And she said, they all call me CB. And she's like, okay, CB, I'll do this for you, but I'm not moving to Austin. And then she got there and just fell in love with Austin, fell in love with the team, realized she could buy an apartment there and, a condo, where in the Bay Area, it's a little more difficult.
5X probably.
Exactly. And so she's there and she's rocking and rolling with their team. They hit their quarter number like couple weeks ago for Q1. It's obviously coming on the end of Q1 if you're on a regular calendar fiscal year. And then Katie in Chicago, her boyfriend had moved there, and so she started that. And then same with Lauren so Katie was from San Francisco and Lauren was one of our top people in New York, and she wanted to move to LA, and we had an office there, and the timing was right for her to take over that market. So it's all been homegrown people running these offices throughout the country. And so it's really cool. And we've now hired additional executive leadership that have more experience to help me, manage these people and continue to up-level them. But I guess we're just fortunate to have really built amazing people that are excited to take on the challenge to lead these markets.
Absolutely. I love what you're talking about. People. For me, there's always been 3 Ps when it comes to joining companies or working with companies. 1 is people, 2 is product, and then 3 is process. And it has to go in that specific order. The fact that you just keep talking about your people, not even talking about the processes or what your actual service is like, I love that, because I feel like when you take care of your people, they take care of everything else. So kudos to you on that.
Absolutely. I am not the process person in our company. We have an operator and he is phenomenal. So I kind of stick to doing stuff like this and working with our team.
Absolutely. So let's get a little on the tougher question side, Carolyn. Given everything that's happening with COVID, as we talked about earlier, unemployment's at 3.2 million across the country right now. Things are obviously scaling down. It looks like we're kind of maybe even getting into a recession. I'm not a financial markets guy or anything by any means, but I could just tell by the numbers that things aren't looking good. Given this current time right now, this time of volatility, tell us a little bit about what your messaging is.
Tough, right? Because not only is it a very, volatile time, it's, what the first thing that people do, and nobody's in the offices, right? And so we are such a collaborative culture where we love coming into the office. We love the people that we work with. So, you take crazy time and the inability to meet in person, and it's really, really challenging. Absolutely. And, in full transparency, we lost 70% of our recs, or 60 to 70% in the last week and a half. And
Wow.
so we still have, 30 to 40% of our clients that are rocking and rolling. And we called every single customer to get ahead of it, which was obviously very challenging for my team to get from one call to the next of like, yep, it's on pause, on pause, on pause.
Right.
However, now the customers that we are working with are dedicated and committed to making it happen. And so we're able to really, go back to our roots of offering the best possible service from our best people. We also had to do a reduction in force. So, we were 100 people 2 weeks ago. Now we're around 70-ish. So,
Got it.
um, we just had to make the call because of the impact to our business, and it
Yeah.
was really tough. I've personally called every single person that we parted ways with and thanked them for their time, because these were not people that we would have done this under any other circumstances.
Yeah.
And we're going to help them. Obviously, we're in a great position to help them find what's next. So that's positive, even given the circumstances. And then with the people that are still here, we're really doubling down on the customers that we have. We're doing things like a company-wide bingo night. Tonight I'm doing a happy hour with our leadership team, nationally, and all getting together there. And then we're also working with the tech platform. I see this as a massive opportunity because layoffs are happening, and we have
Right.
a platform not only with the services business but with Betts Connect, where we can get their profiles filled out, get all their data, and start introducing them to the companies that are hiring. So there's a lot of goodness here, and we have our strongest players on the field. So I think people that, and they're excited to work with the companies that are excited to partner with them. So
Yeah.
it's tough, but I think we're in a really good place to get through this. And I know we're going to come out the other side much stronger than we came into it.
Absolutely. And it sounds like you had to manage your employees out very professionally. Love the fact that you called them all one by one to really thank them for their service. What message would you have for people that just got laid off in their other positions? What recommendations would you give them to start tackling the market back again? And what advice would you give them to, whether it's manage their resume better or improve their network? What would you tell those people that literally just got a pink slip?
Yeah, so I think that now more than ever, that it's going to be competitive to get the jobs that are out there. And
Right.
so, and one of the reasons why we have all the data on Betts Connect is it's very important, especially in sales and go to market, to have the numbers there. And that your resume, it doesn't have to be on LinkedIn, but on your resume or, on your Betts Connect profile or anywhere that you're filling this out, make sure you understand the data of what your performance was at every single job and speak to that. And
Right.
understand your story of how you made it happen for that company, and start with that, right? Make sure it's on there, because companies are going to be trying to go through, the pool, the influx of candidates that are coming their way.
Right.
And the more that you can do to differentiate yourself and make sure that the data is there, you're going to be in a better position to get that next job.
Yeah, absolutely. And last question for you, Carolyn. What advice, you started this 10 years ago. So I remember that was kind of a tough time as is during those, there was a layoff period around 2008, 2009. So clearly you were kind of coming into a turbulent time as well. What advice would you give to someone that wants to start their own business now? Because there are going to be a lot of entrepreneurs that said, I just got laid off. This is my time to shine. I have skills now, but they may not know what they're walking into. What advice would you give that person that wants to say, I want to start my own recruiting company or whatever company it may be?
Well, gosh, I mean, there's a lot of advice. There were, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, I still remember I closed business, and the payment was past due, and they weren't paying on time. And as somebody who always pays her bills on time, I was like, oh my God. So I think make sure you have some savings in place, right? That you're financially able, I think do it, right? If you want to do it, go for it. You have nothing to lose. And however, just make sure you have some money saved, because it's going to take longer than you think it is to get paid from customers once they start coming your way. And just You're going to work harder than you ever have in your entire life. And so you have to shift your mindset from being an employee to being an entrepreneur. This will be your baby, and just be ready for that, and dive in and just be super passionate, because that it's contagious when you love what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, Carolyn, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for taking the time to actually speak with us and give us your insight. Love what you've been doing out there. Sorry to hear about the challenges you're experiencing, but I feel like everyone is experiencing those challenges right now. But the fact that you have a smile on your face and your positive attitude towards it, I know we're all going to get through this. Continue crushing it out there, and please stay in touch.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining. For more episodes, visit salespipepros.com.